So here we are continuing with the complete guide to the world of the unmarried.
I had an old roommate that gave me that subtitle because I just had the title of like the single zombie apocalypse. And then some people misunderstood that as like, is this a zombie, like fantasy book or something? And then I needed to be more specific. So my roommate was like, because, there's a title of, there's a book that's called Complete Guide of the World of the Undead. And so that's a play on that. So the Complete Guide of the World of the Unmarried. So, and I thought that was brilliant, and I made it more specific of like, you know what this is. But we actually, the reason why that idea came up is because some people have the wrong, when they prioritize, like they feel like a relationship, a girlfriend, a boyfriend, or marriage is going to solve their problems, their loneliness or whatever it is. And so when it doesn't happen, or they get disappointed, they break up, they get divorced, there's a tendency, or it doesn't happen for a long time, there's a tendency to turn lifeless and you could tell when someone's like really struggling with this, and they just walk around as if the undead, as if they're trying to hope but they don't have hope, and they're super disappointed, and that dominates everything. But that's kind of where the title and the concept came from. But I can compare that idea with like all these situations that we're in, all the issues in our culture. I kind of applied it into that imagery of like a pathogen or a sickness or some kind of thing in our culture that affects us, that it can get deep. So we focus a lot on Jesus Christ and our relationship with him first. And that's why we do that. In the last podcast, I was thinking about some things based off of what you were sharing last time. But I was thinking about 2 podcasts ago, what is the ideal? And I was thinking about what do you think of when you think of like an ideal family, or that mother, father, children, the father is masculine, the woman is feminine, they're both have a healthy marriage, and they're continually happy. They may have some.
He has a secure job.
He's got
They have a Labrador dog.
Yeah, like we think of like the ideal, and that's reflected in some of the old, TV shows and movies and stuff. And then I was thinking, probably within the last, I don't know, several years, 3 or 4 years or something, I'm like, how many times in the scriptures do we get the ideal like that? Like, and I was thinking of examples, even Jesus Christ, he's the ultimate example. He was basically in Joseph, who raised him, his stepdad, in his perspective, when Mary got pregnant and he found out, it was completely outside the culture and the law. And his mind is like, can you imagine that? Like,
yeah,
amazing.
So that's okay. The side note to that, that's actually what led me to write that. I directed a video for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, but it's called the First Christmas Spirit.
Yeah, I'll put that link down below because it's for the season right now. So.
Yeah, exactly. So I want to bring it up because it's like, hey, it's Christmas season. I love this season, and I love. I'm going to be making another Christmas video just on my own this weekend. Anyway, and that's. I wanted to kind of delve into what was his reaction to Christ and his conversion to Christ. Now, I wasn't able to delve way deep into it like I would have wanted, but it was at least focused on him and his kind of seeing Christ, because it was this weird way of a family being created, and Jesus did not come in a traditional way. Anyway, so continue with the non-traditional.
Yeah. So hopefully this can be like of some encouragement to a lot of people, because we see a lot of the ideal in our head that's not working out, but then it's almost like a something else gets created. Like we're talking about like a family unit as in principle. Like we have the principle of a family unit, and that could look very different, but we still have the principle of family. And then I thought of Moses, like I don't even know if it mentions his father.
Yeah, like that. I never even questioned it until you just brought it up. It's like, oh yeah, wait.
Yeah,
where's his dad?
Yeah, it doesn't. Not that I remember. Like, does it mention his father? We know a lot about his mother, like who knew, inspired to know how to preserve his life, and because she was also inspired because she knew that he was going to do something special in his life, and that they all knew that some deliverer was going to be come, and so she had to preserve his life. But like, think about his life. Like he's that circumstance of his biological mother had to do that to preserve his life. He gets raised by, I think, Pharaoh's wife or something. I can't remember.
Or at least one of his wives.
I need to read that again to refresh my memory. But I'm just thinking of like, the Ten Commandments movie, and that's the only thing I'm thinking about. But like those are the images that I could refer to right now. But I think it was accurate enough in that movie to show that one of the women, I think it was maybe one of the maids, or it was someone in Pharaoh's court, I think, that she, I think, couldn't have children or something. I really have to read the story again. But there was something that she desired a child, and she really wanted to. So just think of the preparation for that, for the spirit to fall upon that woman who found this child floating down the river, and the spirit that would have to prepare her heart to accept him. And this is just realizations I'm having right now as we talk, because I've never really thought this deeply into it. But then him being raised by him and in Pharaoh's court, and actually becoming like pretty high up, first and second in command or something, and thinking his entire life that he's a part of that family, until later, he realizes, oh, I'm actually a part of the Hebrews, and my life isn't what I thought. And you think of the torment that people have to go through to like psychologically rethink your life, but then him going out into the wilderness and having to be taught by the Lord and trained by the Lord himself, and him probably feeling very isolated, with the Lord. And I imagine him going through just a lot of like grief and, just questioning everything and trying to grasp at answers. His whole life is falling apart. And then he finds the Lord. So now he's more refined. And so we highly regard Moses, and the Jews, historically, the Jews really highly regard Moses. Mm-hmm. But you think about the building up of that man, of like a man of God, and can we relate to that? It's not ideal.
Well, so think about if they knew him before, say the Jews knowing him before he delivered them out of Israel, then they would not regard him highly. Mm. But so now they regard him highly, or they did after, because he led them out of Israel. So I think because culturally he would have not been looked positively upon. And I think that's actually repeated so many times in the scriptures, is that these prophets or whoever, and if until they do the great thing, then it's like they would be totally looked over. I think John the Baptist is the same.
I thought of Jesus too.
Yeah, Jesus. So he was totally looked over. Yeah. And why? Because he's not part of that culture that they're used to. And so they disregard. And it was not to compare myself with Jesus, but I'm really close to being like Jesus. No, but like that example that I let in our last one of the girl going around saying, "Are you an RM? Should I even ask?" Because I guess I was doing something that was not culturally like acceptable to her or whatever. I don't know what it was, but anyway. So that same thing over and over and over. I was just reading because we follow this scripture study guide called Come Follow Me, and one of the prophets is like Haggai. He was commanded to go marry this a whore. And then and she even he went back to her old ways. So it was just all these again. What example isn't there that like there's so many examples of non-traditional, because I think because of culture within there, it has to be outside of the culture in order for it to work, for somebody to see it correctly the Lord's way. Otherwise we get too caught up in our cultural things that the Lord can't penetrate through that. And so he needs to get you out of it, and then so that when you go in, for sure what is the right way.
It brings a lot of things to mind, that this is why your whole universe could be destroyed, that you knew that, because we have in our culture, this is the ideal, this is what you really want, but when that's not happening, then you question what's going on. Like Moses was like, what's going on with his life? Or whoever else is like, my life is not what I think it should have been. And then you get, this is what I feel like the Lord does with these, when our life falls apart, is he breaks through what our own concepts so that we could hear his voice. And then when we hear his voice, we're like guided through things that our lives are like, oh, that's wasn't what I was expecting, because I was having a transactional thing. Like, if I'm righteous, I get blessings that I'm expecting. But then when my life falls apart, how do I hear his voice in that?
Yeah, because that wasn't part of the transaction. So then therefore the whole basis has crumbled. I was going to say something else like, for example, I've seen several times, sadly, but like the subject of pornography. So when a girl has this expectation that she's going to marry somebody that has not been affected by pornography, well, welcome to Earth. This is like, I don't know how to say it in a more respectful way, but put pornography at any time in the history of the world, almost every male would have been addicted to it. I mean, look at Daniel. The only way, the reason why he, one of the reasons why he did what he did, is he saw the woman, but he had so much power that he, with Bathsheba, sorry, and that he was tempted, and it's very tempting. Especially when it's readily available to you, and you could, and so just again these cultural things. When these, I've heard of some crazy reactions that when again, I'm not putting the blame on women per se, but maybe learn about the subject more, because you're about to be shocked or you're setting yourself up for failure if you're not fully comprehending what men, not that we're the only ones that are affected by porn, but it's more of like your worldview can be completely destroyed if you think that in one way. I've seen that in marriages, and it's just, of course, anyway, it's a whole different subject that we could talk about, but that's one that I've seen where they're just completely destroyed when they find out, that their husband's, been looking at porn, and it's just a little bit more of a, hey, let's figure it out, as opposed to you're the worst person in this world and stuff like that. Because honestly, I think we've seen another example of this girl, like, I keep dating these men and they've looked at porn or whatever, and she goes after the next, and I've dated at least 8 men, and then and so I just can't find anyone that isn't perfect, and so therefore I'm not going to get married. Anyway, I know there's sensitivity issues with this.
There is, and there's a lot of sensitivity topics.
Yeah.
And that's why this topic is in the book.
Yeah.
Because this is one of them, and it could just that perspective could, if you haven't been triggered yet, you probably will. I mean, it's because we're bringing up topics, and it's almost like whoever's watching this or listening, they'll be like, I wish I can give my perspective, and you can in the comments. I know it's frustrating because I've watched videos. I'm like, well, what about my point of view?
Yeah. And actually I love those. I actually really love those points of view.
Yeah, I do. And
it helps us learn. So I encourage the comments, even maybe point is, because we would probably make another video about it. Yeah. Like, it's like, hey, let's talk about this. That's about these points. But I think the common message is calm down. First of all, be open to learning, all of us, and be cautious. Don't just believe everything that anybody says, even what I say or whatever, but it's more of but also give room to learn, learn the perspective that guy or girl, whatever, has, as opposed to just, oh, you've done that, bang, gone. You're not an RM, gone, or whatever. So it's anyway. I know we got sidetracked a little bit, but keep going.
Well, I want to say real quick that there have been relationships and girls that I've dated who've had that problem. So it's and I remember it hurting me. So it gave me a perspective that I've never had before. And so I wrote part of that in my book as well, is that we're getting to a point where on this one subject that represents a lot of other subjects, that it's getting so bad that everybody is getting touched by it. Like we're all suffering from something. And now the statistics are on that subject is that, yes, there are more guys, but there are also more girls now who are having problems. But I mentioned in the book also that there's been a long time where only the guys would get the pointing of fingers and the porn kills love movements and stuff like that.
The shame.
The shaming culture of that the women who have struggled themselves with that, it's even worse for them, because then they're like, well, I'm a woman and I'm struggling with this and there's no help for me. How do I overcome this? Because
I don't fit into that, what the culture says, that it's all men, and so it's even more.
In fact,
lonely.
there's a message in our, I can't remember what it's called.
His Grace.
Yeah, His Grace. I think is part of His Grace. Yeah, one of His Grace series on the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.org. I think it's on there. But it's a girl who actually was brave enough to like share her experiences, and she shared that. That's where I got that insight from, is that she said that she struggled with it, but everything was geared towards men, and she just.
So then, of course, she's not going to say anything.
And so that perpetual cycle of that couldn't be broken because it goes into a deeper sense of self-isolation and shame, and then secretive, but you still have the problem. So it's never going to get resolved. That exact process is happening with guys, girls, all of it. This whole issue is that it comes out in the shaming culture. Then you go even more private and more secretive, and the drive is still there, so it never gets resolved. So that's just one little piece of. This
is excellent that this is coming out too, that I didn't think we were going to go to yet. But there's a Dr. something Finlayson Fife.
Yes.
What's her first name?
I don't remember. Her name is like really complicated.
Finlayson.
But I think
JFF.
I mentioned her in the book too.
Anyway, yeah.
Yep.
Just at least looking up Finlayson Fife. So Dr. Finlayson Fife, because this has helped. She has helped my wife and I, just listening to her podcasts, because the realm of sexuality in our culture is greatly affecting, has affected women, in the sense of as far as shame, that they shouldn't have sexual feelings, and it's only to serve men when they get married, and so they clam up, and there's tons and tons and tons of marital issues within our culture that women have to go through. So my encouragement as somebody that is married, and then is to anybody that hasn't really delved into their own understanding of sexuality, as opposed to just thinking, oh, when I get married, I'm good because we'll be having sex, and so it's all right. No. There's lots of issues, and so if you have more advantage now to figure it out now, than have the issues come up later and be surprised. And so that's why I highly encourage her to be, taking her courses, or at least just all the free resources that she has on Spotify, or and maybe we can link to her website or something. But that is something, and she talks about pornography, and she talks about everything that has to do with, she's a sex counselor, and she is just absolutely incredible and life-changing for me and my wife, and for just, again, becoming more wise and about all of this stuff. So again, this is coming all back to the tangent that we went on about, I guess we were talking about being shocked or finding out something about the spouse, but I think there was something before that. But anyway.
Yeah, there's this one subject, and I cover a piece of it in the book. Yeah, just pieces, but I feel like there's a whole nother book about it, and I actually have it written. I just was searching for the right timing. Mm-hmm. But there's a lot of things that can go in this. Nuggets of gold that I promise are amazing with this. One of them that I do mention in this book is that the shaming culture needs to go away. Mm-hmm. Once that goes away, that's going to open up a whole new understanding, mm-hmm. and an environment for this to actually be resolved.
Yeah.
So the shaming culture, number one, if you're involved in if you don't know you're involved with the shaming type of tactics to get rid of it, then know that tactic to shame and be angry and whatever is actually making it worse.
Yeah.
It's that is a number one thing that I think and I didn't know how that would be resolved other than talking about the shaming culture. So
I actually want to play on that a little bit more too, because the visual that I'll give to it is that we are all, we come to Earth to learn and to grow. And I call it this giant tar pit, right? We're commanded to go down to this tar pit and do this, right? So, I think the shaming culture is if we shame each other for getting tar on ourselves, even though we're commanded to go into the tar pit and live and help other people out of the tar pit, or whatever you want to call it, but get cleaned up or whatever. But this tar pit is significant because it's like, how do you react to another person who has tar on them? And do you say, and I believe this is culturally, this is what we're doing, is that we are scolding, we are shaming anybody for having any on themselves, when in fact we have some on ourselves too. And guess what? We're all supposed to have it on ourselves because we're commanded to go here. So what our reaction should be is embracing each other and helping each other, not to say, oh, you are doing this wrong and get away from me, but more of, and obviously protect yourself if somebody's abusing or whatever, then, protect yourself, and there are other resources for that person to get help. But still, I think it's that perspective. It's the same thing in the Book of Mormon. There's these, if you're not familiar, they're called the 2,000 Stripling Warriors, and these are young men or boys that are they went to go and fight this war, and there was not as many of them as there were of the enemy, and the parents couldn't go fight in the war because they had made a promise to the Lord that they wouldn't fight anymore. So they buried all their weapons. And so, but there was this inevitable war that had to be fought, yet the parents were trying to stay true to their covenants. So, or their promises that they made, that they wouldn't kill anymore. They don't want to do that anymore. Even if it meant that they would end their lives, that they would rather not kill anybody else. And so, but the sons, they didn't make that covenant. And so they were like, well, we'll do it. We'll go and fight. And so, but they had faith in the Lord. And so they go, and the miracle of this story, if you haven't read it, is that they come back and not one of them died, but there was a bunch of them were wounded. I don't know if all of them were wounded, but they were wounded. So could you imagine if they came back and they were wounded, and everybody else that didn't go fight in it ridiculed them for being wounded at all, like shamed them because you should have come back perfect. You shouldn't have had these wounds. And so, no, they cared for them. They brought them in and cared for them and helped them heal. Now, I know that, it's like, well, that's not the exact same example as, people that are looking at pornography or whatever, because they're choosing to do that. All right. Point is, we're all affected by this world. This world is very difficult. And so instead of shaming, rather, why not try to help each other heal? And learning about it ourselves, right? So learning about why these wounds are there, why it's affecting so many people. So is it something that you just go, now I'm sure, well, I'll just stay on that subject. So it's more of giving each other room to have, so it's compassion on that person to be able to, if they're making mistakes or whatever, wherever they're at in their lives, do we cast them out, or are we bringing them in? And bringing them in, I mean metaphorically, not bringing them in your home and then they start, doing something bad to your family or whatever. And also, and this, you'll find this with JFF, stop comparing because somebody's looking at pornography, then therefore they are going to become the worst person, a murderer. Mm-hmm. I've heard that. I've heard that comparison. That is the worst thing, because it's not true. It's not true. It's a lie. It's a deceit. And if you think that way, then you have just really honestly need to learn more. That's it. It's just education, and to really figure that out. And we're going to be pleading with people to just learn, be open-minded enough to just learn more about the perspectives that we're all coming from, as opposed to the shaming. And maybe I'm shaming now people that shame.
Joe, trying to get rid of that.
Anyway, I get passionate about it because I absolutely want change in that culture.
This shows that this affects the culture and the dating world, the marriage world, just this itself, not just a person who has a problem with that, but those people who have a problem with understanding it and then shaming. Mm-hmm. So there's people struggle with some kind of passion in their life, who whatever it is, some people can't stop shaming others behind people's backs, or something like that, tearing down and having a hard time forgiving. And I guarantee this topic, once you get some, seek out revelation on understanding it and what's really going on. Because I've just, with my conversations with others about it, we get open about it. Mm-hmm. And that's one of the keys, is getting open about talking about it. Mm-hmm. And shaming culture, and then being open and talking about it and feeling comfortable in doing that. Mm-hmm. And so once you do, you find so many nuggets of revelation, nuggets of gold, gems, whatever it is. Like, oh, I've never thought of it in that way. And how I know it's a truth is that it increases my understanding about it and increases my patience and love for people who struggle.
Exactly. And it's and I also want to address this one thing, and we can talk about it later. stop calling yourself a recovering addict and counting the days that you haven't seen pornography. Okay, so that is a whole different series that we can get into.
It is.
But stop it. That's all I gotta say, because that you will ultimately fail. Yeah, and I've gotten caught up in that before, and of like the just that culture of the shame of, oh well, you've even been tempted by it, well you can't, and then it's like, oh you looked at it, okay, well I'll give you that one if you just never look at it again. And then we're bombarded with it every other. And I think this is the best medicine, and you brought it up, so it's your fault, but just joking, the exposure, right? So the exposure of it's even a temptation.
Yeah.
And so
Christ was tempted with all things.
Yeah, and that's been my saving grace in my marriage, is that if I'm tempted with it, I can bring it up, and I am not shamed by my wife.
Right.
And so it is so that like that again, that will bring tears to my eyes, because it has been, that is the tool to disperse or get Satan out of that relationship, because it's not about, again, I have to be careful with this, but try to understand it. It's not about the porn. It's about getting Satan in between your relationship.
This is what is happening right there. There's two things that I think about right away. And when you're able to say, whenever you are tempted with it, whatever circumstance, and you feel comfortable in doing it, that's one thing. Mm-hmm. You feel comfortable in saying it. And when your spouse, your husband or your wife, or who your spouse is, or maybe your friend or whoever you're confiding in, you feel safe in saying, I'm tempted. These are the times I'm tempted, or I'm tempted right now, and this is the temptation. What you're doing is you're not only feeling comfortable with that person, but that person understands that what's really going on there. Mm-hmm. So that's an additional knowledge that they need to, when you say that you're being tempted, or when that even in real time, like, I'm being tempted right now, and this is what it is. And then they understand. Yeah. And they understand what's going on. And what that does, and you're talking about this, it exposes Satan's temptation, and he has to flee. Mm-hmm. So that gives you power. And think about the opposite. When you don't have that resource of exposing Satan's temptations, and you go into the shaming and you go into your isolation, it gives Satan that condition where he can do anything he wants to you. And nobody else, and you'd have no help.
You have no help. You are alone.
Yeah.
And that's what he wants, because you don't have no strength.
So you have you have all these levels of just knowledge and understanding that one thing, and then getting rid of the shaming culture, that's part of it, and then exposing Satan and his temptations when they come, or maybe you fell into it and you share, this is what happened. Mm-hmm. And then you realize that the best of us, all of us have been tempted. Mm-hmm. And Jesus himself was tempted. I guarantee he had to be tempted with everything. Mm-hmm. So this had to be included in there. And we draw on him, since he's the only sinless one, we draw on him for strength and inspiration in knowing how to get out of that. But since we are weak, we fall into it, and we fall into that temptation. Yeah.
I was going to say, yes. So that is the protection, is by exposing it. So it's twofold in a relationship. Now, I am referring to a relationship where both people are honestly living a true, God-centered life, And because there are now, I've brought this up before, this subject, and somebody said, well, you have to be careful because some people are in relationships where they say, like the husband, in this case, I'll use the husband as the example, that he's abusive towards his wife, and then uses this as our conversation right now as ammunition to get her to do something or whatever, or as ammunition or so anyway, so I'm hoping we're just assuming here, everybody that's listening, that obviously this is why it's complicated, because there are complicated relationships that there. So if that is that way, well, then I would suggest going to a therapist, in the therapy, because there are issues that need to be resolved that are outside of yourself. And if you don't have enough resources, and I am a proponent of therapy, and obviously the right kind, but it's more of just because when you have say you're in a complicated situation like that and you don't know how to get out of it, and so if you don't have support, well, then you got to get it somewhere. Anyway, a professional can really help. And anyway, I just wanted to give that caveat there, because I know that there are situations that are way more complicated than just, oh, well, the husband is doing this thing. Well, he could be using that against her or whatever. And I recognize that.
Yeah, you're mentioning of both have to be seeking after revelation and understanding and being open to understanding it. And you're mentioning something where both of them aren't.
Right.
It's like, you need to fix your problem. Once you fixed it, then I'll be okay with. It's like when we're both seeking after revelation, and I have a little indicator. If you don't have compassion towards somebody struggling with something, that means you don't understand it yet. That's with any subject. And once you start, you're learning about it, and as you grow, you start to have compassion for them. That's when you're starting to understand it. And this does get complicated, because you get hurt, and you have to go through your own healing. And so the person that gets hurt has all the reason in the world to resist that idea, is to be like, I don't want to understand. I don't want to. I've been hurt by this. But the thing is, with abuse, with problems in the dating culture, that is key. And when you understand it, even though you've been hurt by it, when you understand it, healing can come and forgiveness can come. Yeah, that's even from my own experiences and others' experiences when they had really narcissistic person in their life. Could be mother, father, significant other, someone's they're dating in a constant basis. They are always dating the same narcissistic person. And so they get hurt by it. And they have every reason to be angry, to be bitter, to be all these reasons. And they could blame. And they're justified in doing so. But what happens is, and I mentioned this in the book, is that you become infected.
So another zombie
in a different pathogen. And if you carry that with you, it will have a perpetual effect on you. And if you don't find a way to get it out of you and to be able to understand it and forgive and heal yourself and be cured of it, then it's going to carry into your next relationship. It will carry into your life, and you'll get discouraged. You'll get angry easily. You'll get very bitter. And so the goal here is, the only way of doing that is through a relationship with Jesus Christ, because he provides revelation. He provides the revelation to understand things that you've never thought of before, and things that you're able to forgive now because of him. You can give it to him. And one of the revelations that you mentioned that I could give it as example is understanding addiction. And there was a guy that I mentioned in the book as well. He's talking about, he doesn't even like calling it addiction. He wants to call it bonding, because that opens up a new way of thinking and more revelation. So he didn't call it an addiction, he called it bonding. So what are you bonding with? That means something else is missing in your life, or something is not missing. So you bond with something, and that means a substance, self-medicating with marijuana, or drugs, cocaine, anything that you're self-medicating with, you're bonding with it.
Sugar.
That's
for me. Honestly, I struggle with it.
Yeah, Snickers.
No, but and I hate to, like, I don't mean to diminish, but it's honestly like I resort to that, and anyway. Point is there, and there's lots of other things that is so right. I agree with the point of we have to understand why these things are why we're trying to self-medicate, as opposed, and again, we're in our culture, we're hyper focused on, say, if it's pornography, we're just focused on the porn. Rather, that's just the fruit of the deeper things that are happening. And if we're not getting connection, and guys need that, guys and girls need that connection, and then but if we have to be careful, because it's like, if that's what we're resorting to, but we think that, when we get married that's going to go away. Nope, temptations still come when you're married, so that doesn't go away. But how you dealt with it in a healthy way, that means you'll be successful in your marriage, because you figured out how to deal with it in a healthy way. Even though it might not be gone forever, it's more of a you were able to talk about it with her before you got married, so she understands what's going on. Because if you hide it, and this is the side of, again, I kind of resort to guy, girl, whatever, but it could be flipped. But if you're hiding, because I mean, girls will do the same thing with other things too. I mean, it's not whatever it is that you're resorting to self-medicate. And so if you're not open with that thing, and you're hiding it because of shame or because of whatever you don't want to hurt them, so you just keep hiding it. Well, it's going to come out sometime. So even if you think you can just like hold on to it for as long as you can, or what, and they'll never find out. No, it will come out. And so it's more of you might as well get it out early and start off on the right foot, because then you can actually, it's a great opportunity. It's a great opportunity to use be vulnerable. And if you're dating that person and they can't handle it, if like what you're going through or whatever, then okay, then you shouldn't be dating that person, or shouldn't get married to that person, because you need somebody that you can honestly open up with, and to see their reaction to that. And if they react in a way of anyway, in a way that is loving, that shows that compassion, and to support them in the way of healing. And again, I'm not talking about just because you didn't look at pornography anymore, then we'll get married. But no, like the deeper issues that are coming, that need to come out and expose those things, whether it's you are a person that is what's that called, codependent. And so somebody that's codependent will hide this issue or this habit or whatever, because they don't want to hurt that other person, but they're codependent, so they're not reliant on their emotions are heavily they're not dealing with them in the right way, and so they'll self-medicate in secretive ways. Well, okay, so you got to learn how to not be what did I just say? Codependent. To not be codependent on somebody else. And so figure those things out, as opposed to, I haven't looked at pornography for 100 days. Success. No, that's actually a failure if you're not looking at, I'm codependent. So it's another reason, if you can't figure those things out, then I'm always about like go to a therapist to see these things, because they are not biased to don't want to hurt your feelings or whatever, but it's kind of like, oh yeah, you have some codependency. Here's, because when I went to one, I was going into these spirals of negativity or whatever, but I didn't really understand it. And he was like, start writing down, maybe this is this will be helpful, but write down any time a negative thought enters your head. And the negative thought can be anything, because you'll start to pay attention to that. I didn't even realize they were negative thoughts. And so I started writing these down, and I had just this list and list. And the cool thing that happened was that I stopped writing them down, and they stopped coming, because it was almost like my ego recognized that I was paying attention to it. So it's kind of having that third person view of myself, and it's shut up. And so it was quiet. And so I was like, and then I started having these really positive days, because it realized that I was paying attention to it now. And so it was amazing. I've helped other people understand that too. And they were like, that changed my life, because I started writing these things down, and I don't get into these deep spirals anymore.
They're the exposure of Satan's temptation.
Yeah.
It goes back to that. And then when you do it, it exposes his thoughts, and you realize it. And now you're like, oh, you've been caught.
Yeah.
Basically, that's what you're saying there.
Exactly. And so bring that into a relationship, meaning this is what these are my, that will only bring comfort to your significant other, that you are actually thinking about these things, as opposed to, well, I haven't looked at pornography in 2 years. Yes, I have looked at it, but I haven't. Oh, great. Oh, whew. I got that. Anyway, I got grilled by some people, and they were like, and so they're like, as long as you're not addicted to pornography, then or whatever. And it was just like, that's what it is. That's so surfacey. Like, there's these deeper issues that I've been whatever free. I've haven't eaten sugar in this long, or whatever it is, that it's not about the counting of those days, because you'll fail. So what? And then you just get down on yourself, and again shamed, and then you backsliding and whatever. And it's like, oh, I got to start again, day one, but you're not focusing on those little issues at all. The important ones.
Right.
That is just a fruit of something deeper. So let's figure those things out.
Yeah, you're saying, like, sometimes it's not. A lot of times it's not the actual addiction or the self-medicating thing. It's not the pornography. It's not the alcohol. It's the beginning of the negative thoughts that could be unrelated. And this is what I'm kind of gathering, is that you're, as these negative thoughts kind of spiral, then it becomes even greater and greater. And then you have to self-medicate.
Yep.
And so then it turns into, you're going to that for comfort. But when you can write it down, these negative thoughts, they turn into other negative thoughts.
Yep.
And then it's your whole life. You're doubting your whole life, and then you get weak, and then angry, or whatever it is, and then you self-medicate.
Yeah.
And there's another 2 nuggets here. I'll give you 2 more nuggets of gold about this subject. It could be a bonding with any substance. Pornography is what we're talking about, but when you talk about Alcoholics Anonymous, AA, or any other 12-step program or something, there's a couple things I want to change. And these are little nuggets of gold that I feel like came out in this. That having a relationship with Jesus Christ it may not be in other programs, but an exclusive belief in Christianity and believing in Jesus is his ability to completely change and heal you. And that means no scars. That means you're completely renewed. And if you have ever felt that before, then I hope and pray that you do, because this will change the way you think about yourself and the way that the Savior works in your life. And so with that in mind, even though you're making step-by-step progress, you're getting better at finding those trigger thoughts that get into whatever, and you're you're catching it earlier, or you're able to finally work out an environment where you feel safe and sharing those temptation thoughts or something like that with someone else, that you can start progressing and getting better at it. And you could know that in the future, you don't have to refer to yourself as an addicted person, a recovering addicted person for the rest of your life. I don't believe that. With that belief and faith in Jesus Christ, I don't believe that any person who's pursuing that relationship with him will have to refer to themselves as a recovering addict. And I will talk to anybody about that, because as soon as I took a hold of that thought, just this incredible motivation and willing to take on any challenge in whatever it is came into my heart. And I was like, oh my gosh, this gives me so much motivation and so much forgiveness of myself that I can go forward and I don't have to carry it. It's almost like you're carrying it with you.
Yeah.
Even though and also what you said with counting the days of the last time you fell or indulged in something. What that does is you're carrying it with you.
And the greater fall it will be.
It is. And
so it's 500 days. You better not fail.
Yep.
You better not fall one more time, because look at that fall. You're going to fall all the way back 500 days.
And you have to start all over
And it's discouraging, and you don't want to. And I guarantee it won't happen again. You will not get to 500 again.
Yeah, it is. And there's even a His Grace video about a guy who was addicted to meth or something. It was a drug. But he was clean for a long time, but went into a backsliding. He recycled into it. It got on him so much that he overdosed and he died. So this can get really bad. Like when someone gets so discouraged because it's been, a month or 2 years or something, and they broke down and they had a phase in their life or something, that they go through a divorce they didn't expect, and they just like go back to it. And so then it's even worse. So this is what I would say instead of doing that. Instead of counting the days that you failed, carrying that with you, count the days that you were tempted once, but didn't desire it. Meaning there's a situation where you've been trying a lot in your life, and there was a time that you normally would have indulged, and you get tempted and you're starting to indulge, but then you're like, I just don't want this, and then you don't do it. That is something that you should like put on a plaque.
So
remember.
That's the thing that you put in your bag, because the more of those actually lightens you. It's like helium balloons. It's like lightening the burden as opposed to heavy.
Exactly.
Because if I fail, if you fail but you have all these helium balloons, it's still going to lift you up. But if you're carrying the heavy things and you fail, all those things go with you on that fall, and it's a brutal hit at the bottom because you just throw them all away. But the carrying the positives will carry you, even if you fall or whatever. You still have them; they're still on your back, and they're still lifting you up for the next thing. You're progressing versus there's not a big crash.
You're thinking about the moments that you have overcome. You're thinking about the moments that you're not addicted. You're not change what you're in your mind. I'm an addict, and I'm going to be an addict for the rest of my life, and I'm just going to recover. But think in your mind, in that moment, I wasn't an addict. In that moment, that's who I am.
I didn't act like a crazy or whatever. Yeah, like I was a crazy animal that was uncontrolled or whatever. Like, hey, I did that. I did that one. And then as you have enough of those, it's like people have you put the analogy of like breaking a stick, and that's easy. But if you put a bundle of sticks and try to break the bundle of sticks, it's harder. Yeah. It's the same kind of thing for me. It's like then the more positives you have, the the easier it is to continue with the positives. But the more negatives you have, and that's the negative. Anyway, we can keep going on that, but that's
the
powerful.
It is. And the effort is to try to make those moments more often as possible. And you're like, what went right there? What did I do? And ponder on that for the rest of your life, because that is the first step of you are the unaddicted person at that moment. That's the person you are.
Yeah.
So let's figure out how you could keep replicating that, even if you fall again. We're talking about the atonement of Jesus Christ. Like, we're talking about, we look forward, and even if we fall, we look forward.
So what would you call that? So instead of a recovering addict, you would call it so the progressive thing. So because that's interesting. That's a great point. Like, you have, like, a recovering addict means that since you have fallen into it, and now there's, like, you've been addicted, and so then therefore you will always carry that burden with you for the rest of your life. Yeah. And I honestly, so what would you call the positive? I am not a recovering, but I
don't know yet, but
covering.
I don't know, but I think the point with the 12-step program, or whatever program, saying you have to admit that you're addicted, that there's a point in that. Into some people say, oh, I'm not addicted, I could stop at any time, and then it keeps going. And so that, I think that's the point in, like, you have to admit that you're relying on it for some reason.
Yes, yeah.
So to a point where you get help.
So they are trying to be helpful, and I've seen people get helpful, but I don't think it's not perfect. And so I see that you do have to recognize that you are using that thing to self-medicate. Well, what are you trying to self-medicate for? And I know they actually do get that in the 12-step program. They get into those things, but I agree. I don't like that perspective of just carrying the negative, but rather, and they can say, well, but since I haven't done it in 2 years, that's positive. But it still carries with it failure. So I agree.
Well, there's a lot of the thing that makes me excited to, like, talk to people about, and including this right here, is to know that you don't have to refer to yourself as a recovering addict for the rest of your life. And that's just a sentence that you have the rest of your life. We are in a fallen world. That's what we have to deal with for the rest of our life. But we are in a fallen world to overcome it through Jesus Christ and to be healed and strengthened. I've seen people who are new people. They're changed. They're as if they never had a problem. Or maybe they had a problem with adultery, and it could get as far as that, and having it be a habit or something, but they are changed through that relationship to Jesus Christ. There's a hope in there. That's the definition of a hope in Christ. And that gives all the purpose in the world to go forward with hope, and knowing that there's more revelation to come, and more understanding that you normally wouldn't have. So I think of, what else in my life can I change that will create this environment where I don't feel like I have to go to a self-medicating moment. And so that's our growth, that's our progression.
I think that's a great place to end. And for people that were listening, if you have any ideas of what we can call it, because I think it could become, it's like, let's help each other focus on those positives. And this was my point from the beginning, is giving the people around you the space to be able to not be called an addict, but rather becoming a disciple of Christ, or whatever it is, like that path of discipleship. And that's the root word of disciple, is discipline. So we're on the path of that. And so versus I'm a recovering addict versus, no, I'm on the path of discipleship.
That's the ideal. The path of the discipleship, whatever that looks like, that's the ideal.
Amen.